The story of Benedict Arnold is one of the most painful in the entire American Revolution, a brilliant soldier whose courage once inspired thousands, whose name now stands as a synonym for betrayal across centuries. It begins in the summer of 1778, in the flushed aftermath of the British evacuation of Philadelphia. Arnold had been badly wounded at Saratoga the year before, a musket ball shattering his leg during the desperate fighting at Bemy's Heights. The injury left him limping, in constant pain, unable to take the field. Washington, valuing his proven talent and knowing the man needed employment, appointed him military commander of Philadelphia. It seemed a fitting reward. The hero of Quebec and Saratoga governing the largest city the British had occupied. But Philadelphia was no quiet garrison post. The British had held it for 9 months, and many wealthy families had cooperated, openly entertaining officers, selling goods, attending balls in red-coated company. Now those families faced confiscation, trials for treason, bitter neighbors demanding revenge. Congress had ordered that all public property belonging to the enemy be seized for the army, and sales of goods frozen until ownership could be sorted out. Arnold was supposed to enforce that order. It was delicate, thankless work requiring tact, patience, and scrupulous fairness, qualities he did not possess. He was blunt, proud, thin-skinned. He quarreled immediately with Pennsylvania's state government. He lived extravagantly, fine horses, lavish dinners, imported wines at a time when the country was bankrupt and soldiers at Valley Forge had frozen without shoes. Whispers spread he was enriching himself through wartime trade, using his position to grant favors to loyalist merchants in exchange for kickbacks, showing too much leniency to families who had welcomed the British. Some of the charges were true, others exaggerated, but the damage was done. His reputation, once shining, began to tarnish. Into this tense atmosphere stepped Margaret Ship and Peggy, a 22-year-old beauty from one of Philadelphia's prominent families. Her father had kept a careful neutrality during the occupation, but her circle included many who had danced with British officers. Peggy was witty, charming, accomplished at the harpsichord, and she captivated Arnold almost instantly. He was 38, lame, twice her age, but he pursued her with the same intensity he once brought to battle. They married in April. Peggy brought connections, social grace, and crucially access to loyalist networks still quietly active in the city. By then Arnold's grievances had hardened into something darker. Congress had passed him over for promotion again and again. Junior officers he considered inferior were made major generals while he remained a brigadier. He had spent his own money outfitting troops, lost heavily in trade ventures ruined by the war, and watched corrupt contractors grow rich while his pay came in worthless paper currency. He felt cheated, disrespected, abandoned by the cause he had bled for. Letters flew between him and Peggy's loyalist friends. Through them he made contact with British intelligence in New York. What began as complaints turned into negotiation. By mid-1779 Arnold was secretly offering information, troop movements, supply routes, assessments of morale in exchange for money and promises of rank in the British service. The correspondence was handled through intermediaries, most importantly Major John Andre, Clinton's aide-de-camp and head of intelligence. Andre was charming, cultured, 29 years old, everything Arnold felt the American cause lacked. The two men never met face to face in those early months, but their letters grew bolder. In the summer of 1780, Washington gave Arnold command of West Point, the vital fortress controlling the Hudson River highlands. If the British could seize it, they could cut New England off from the rest of the states, reopen the old invasion corridor Burgoyne had failed to exploit. Arnold saw his chance. He began quietly weakening the defenses, delaying repairs, scattering supplies, sending misleading reports about the garrison's strength. He fed Andre precise details, the number of men, the condition of the chains across the river, the placement of artillery. The plan was simple and devastating. Andre would come ashore from a British sloop, meet Arnold at a secluded point, receive final plans and cash, and return with orders for Clinton to strike. Arnold demanded £20,000 sterling, about $3 million in today's money, and a general's commission in the British Army. The British agreed. On the night of September 21, 1780, Andre landed near Haverstraw under a flag of truce. He met Arnold in the woods. They talked for hours. Arnold handed over detailed sketches and strength returns. Dawn approached. Andre could not return to the sloop before daylight. Arnold gave him civilian clothes and a pass signed in his own name, directing that the bearer be allowed to proceed to White Plains on public business. Andre rode south toward the British lines. He never made it. On September 23, three New York militiamen, John Paulding, Isaac Van Wart, and David Williams, stopped him near Tarrytown. Andre tried to talk his way through, first claiming to be an American officer, then offering bribes. The militiamen searched him. Inside his boots, they found the plans for West Point, the strength returns, the pass signed by Arnold. They took him to the nearest continental post. Word reached Arnold at his headquarters just as Washington and his staff were arriving for breakfast. A courier burst in with the news. A spy named John Andre had been captured carrying papers from General Arnold. Arnold read the dispatch, turned pale, excused himself, kissed his sleeping infant son, told Peggy the game was up, and fled on horseback to the river. He reached the British sloop Vulture, still anchored nearby, and escaped. Washington arrived to find chaos. Peggy, hysterical, tore at her dress, screamed that her husband was lost, that they were all ruined. Washington handled her with gentleness. He believed she had been kept in the dark but ordered her sent to her family in Philadelphia. Andre was brought to headquarters. He conducted himself with calm dignity, admitted everything, asked only to be shot as a gentleman rather than hanged as a spy. Washington had no choice. Military law was clear. On October 2, 1780, John Andre was hanged at Tappan. He went to the gallows in full uniform, saying only that he wished to face his fate like a soldier. The nation reeled. Arnold's treason struck deeper than any battlefield defeat. He had been a hero Quebec, Bowker Island, Saratoga. Now he was a byword for treachery. Congress offered a reward for his capture. Washington called it treachery of the blackest dye. Soldiers swore they would never serve under a man like that. Yet the enemy held. West Point stayed in American hands. The conspiracy collapsed before it could deliver its blow. Arnold spent the rest of the war in British service. He led a raid on New London, Connecticut, his home region, burning ships and homes, killing civilians. The act only deepened the hatred. After the war he lived in England, then Canada, then London again, wealthy but shunned forever, the man who sold his country. Peggy followed him, bore more children, died, and their descendants lived quietly in Canada and England, bearing a name that still carries a stain. The betrayal at West Point was the closest the revolution came to catastrophic defeat. Had the fortress fallen, the Hudson would have been open, New England isolated, the war perhaps lost. That fall was due to chance, the alertness of three militiamen on a dusty ode me Tarrytown, to the unshakable loyalty of the army Washington had built the years of Herja. Arnold's treason left scars. It fed distrust of high officers, deepened suspicion of anyone who had served in the British Army before switching sides, reminded everyone how fragile the cause remained even after 5 years of fighting. Yet it also clarified something essential. The revolution was not held together by any single man, however gifted. It rested on the conviction of thousands of ordinary soldiers, farmers, shopkeepers, women managing farms alone, who believed the principles in the Declaration were worth any sacrifice. When the war ended 2 years later, Arnold was already in exile, his name a curse. The men who had endured Valley Forge, who had stood at Monmouth, who had marched through the Carolina swamps with the Green, who had closed the trap at Yorktown, they kept their honor. They built a nation, and they left behind a lesson that endures. Courage and talent are not enough. Loyalty to principle, to comrades, to the idea of self-government is what separates heroes from traitors. Benedict Arnold once had both. In the end, he kept only the first and lost everything else. The revolution, battered but unbroken, kept the second and gained a country.